You meet people, and I would say probably 80% of the population has thought about flipping a house. I mean, it's just like, so it is possible. I mean, it really is possible. If you have some systems in place and, a little bit of knowledge, I mean, it really is. Really, money, people always think that's the hardest thing, but honestly, if you show somebody with money that they can make a good return on their investment, you can find money. And that's doing joint ventures. But there's a lot of things called hard money out there where short-term money is available for real estate investing. It's at a higher rate, but it's available. So you can get money. It's not that difficult. And I'm trying to stress how important it is for the investor to think like an appraiser.
Ready? Ready to rock and roll? Is that action? All right.
Okay. That's right.
All right.
Absolutely. Go. Go.
Hello, everybody. It's Jason Will with
Go.
This is a real estate podcast, but we talk about leadership, personal growth, and becoming the best version of yourself. Leadership, check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Growth, best version of yourself.
Go.
So this is a real estate podcast. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Impact Agent Podcast. I am joined today by Mr. Bruce Glenn. Bruce, how are you?
Hi, doing great. Thank you very much. Appreciate you having me.
My pleasure, man. I'm excited about this episode. The Impact Agent Podcast is all about, what's impacted you, how are you impacting people, and I think you have an opportunity to tell a story about an event in our history that was a great educational journey for a lot of us, especially those that were in real estate. Before we get to that, though, just tell me a little bit about your real estate journey and what you do and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I'm a real estate appraiser. That's what I do full time. I've done that for 30 years now. I actually did start buying properties back in the mid 1980s in Denver, Colorado. My first flip was about 1985 or 1986.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was a paint contractor for a number of years and worked on houses, and I just enjoyed doing that. And then I saw somebody in Denver buy a house and fix it up. It was before the flipping shows, before anything, and it was somebody I did some work for, and I saw the potential there. They made a lot of money, and I was like, I'd like to do that. So I just started there, got a partner, and we ended up bought a 4-unit in Denver, and I was kind of hooked after that. So that was in Denver, and then I moved down to Birmingham. I was in Washington, then to Birmingham, and then I started it up down here. I became an appraiser and started buying and selling houses down here.
Wow. So where are you from originally?
Well, originally upstate New York, Syracuse, New York. I was born, but I've been, New York here. I lived in Memphis. I lived in Denver, Washington D.C. So I moved around a fair amount.
And ended up putting, some serious roots down in Birmingham.
When I moved down originally, I was about a junior in high school with my family, and then I moved around some, and I just came back to Birmingham, be with the family, and then I've been here since about 1990.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So we know so many people are fascinated with real estate investing and flipping, but very few people actually make that transition, make it a reality. So everybody, it's just really a dream of most people. But and there's so many questions about how to get into it, where to find the money. So when you found that first investment, how did you identify it as a good investment? And then, how did you end up pulling the trigger on it?
Basically, I found a really, really good realtor that dealt with investors. And he really just took my hand and led me and showed me what our process was. He would pick about probably 4 or 5 houses a week. And there was a lot of stuff on the market in Denver at that time. And I would go out and just drive by 4 or 5 houses and he'd go, all right, which one is a possibility? And I go, okay, I like this one or this one. And then he would make offers. We would make offers contingent on doing inspections. And we threw out offers after offers, but he put out really kind of lowball offers. And then when somebody would bite, then we'd start negotiating. And that's how we, were able to get that first one. And then I didn't have money at the time, but I had a friend that had money, and I had talked to her, and I was telling her all about it. And she's like, I'd be willing to invest in that. So it was kind of my first JV deal, a joint venture deal with a partner. So
there's the bridge. I just mentioned that we all have friends and relatives who are like, oh my gosh, I'd love to get in real estate investing. There's TV shows about it, but people are like always, well, I don't have the money. I don't want to risk the money. But some of those people that want to get into it have the money. They just need you to find the deal.
That's exactly it. I do a lot of joint venture deals. I've got probably 3 or 4 different people right now that I've done for years, and they've got the money, and we've done enough deals where they trust me. Really, money. People always think that's the hardest thing, but honestly, if you show somebody with money that they can make a good return on their investment, you can find money, and that's doing joint ventures. But there's a lot of things, hard money out there where short-term money is available for real estate investing. It's at a higher rate, but it's available. So you can get money. It's not that difficult.
Yeah. I mean, it's like today's market, there's a shortage of inventory, but if you find an off-market property, you're going to find a buyer. Yeah. I mean, it's just like that. One thing you mentioned, just a little bunny trail here, you mentioned that, when you started from zero, and a very investor savvy real estate agent was a huge help to you, almost like a mentor, right? Yeah. And I love to just highlight that because obviously I'm biased. I'm a real estate agent, and our industry is under attack. People just don't see the value in us, and I am consistently told on a very frequent basis how technology is going to make me obsolete. But what you just described just kind of showcases the value that a real estate agent can provide and then survive, not only survive, but thrive if they have an expertise to lend.
Yeah,
right?
I agree 100%. I teach and I kind of mentor people, but one of the big things I talk about is putting a team together, and the first member of that team is a realtor. I mean, you've got a good real estate agent is invaluable. I mean, really, that's the first thing you need. So I'm all, and I have relationships with a lot of different realtors, so I've been told that appraisers are going to be extinct, because of technology, and they've been telling me that for 25 years,
Right.
And I tell people, there will be a percentage of loans that won't need an appraisal, but most banks or most lenders want somebody to put eyes on that property, and I don't see that's ever going to change. So I'm not really worried about the appraisal business going. So yeah, that's kind of how I feel. So
let's talk about leading up to the Great Recession. So you did this first flip, and it started taking off from there?
Yeah. When I came to Birmingham, I really started with some real small properties. I mean, I'm talking little 2-1s, 800 to 1,000 square feet, some stuff off of Green Springs Highway, if anybody's familiar with those little houses back there. And, I was just doing those, just 1 or 2 a year, not much, because I was working full-time as an appraiser. And then the late 1990s, a friend of mine wanted to get involved with me, and so we kind of partnered up, and then we were like, let's pick this up, let's start doing more. So we were doing anywhere 6, 8 a year, and then we started buying properties for rental properties because I had the idea that rental property portfolio was going to be part of my retirement. Mm-hmm. So we started gathering rental properties, and at the point before the recession, I think we had 16 single-family houses, and then we were flipping. We were doing 8 or 10, 6, 8 or 10 a year, depending on how many we had. So things were really, really going. We were going.
How do you identify these ideal candidates for a flip? Are you doing mail outs? Are you making phone calls? Are the real estate agents finding them for you?
Honestly, most of mine are found from real estate agents and not on MLS, but I've just developed relationships over the years, and I'll have, just for instance, I just did a townhouse where the realtor had a friend that owned this townhouse, and she was just tired of it. They hadn't done anything to it in years. Didn't really want to put it in the market, didn't want people coming through the house and everything, and just asked the realtor if she knew somebody. She called me, and I went over and we negotiated a price, and I bought it from her, and then I turn around and give it to the realtor to list when I'm done with it, So a lot of times there's a lot of properties out there that people don't want to really list. They don't want to go through that process, and those are the kind of things that I'm able to pick up. So probably, I'd say 75% of my purchases are from realtors, doing off-market stuff. And then I've got wholesalers and then different other ways, but realtors are probably my main source.
So there is a way to find the money. Like you find the deal, you find the money. You probably have a few people raising their hands going, hey, I got money. Exactly. Then those deals go good. They want to give you more money, right?
That's exactly it.
But then you can activate the real estate community for you and say, hey, if you find a deal, I've got the money, and so you're kind of making things happen for yourself.
That's exactly it. There are situations, I've bought hoarder houses where the people, they're embarrassed to have anybody come in their house.
Right.
They don't want that. And so they're open to somebody like me coming in and just write a check and we're done, and get it over with. So they're out there. The deals are out there.
And it's unique, though, because you have this, decades-long experience with appraisals, so you really know how to value a property. You teach people, but is that part of what you teach, like how they can value it?
Yeah, exactly. Matter of fact, I do a call every Wednesday night, and last night we were talking about appraisals, and I'm trying to stress how important it is for the investor to think like an appraiser, because so many times I've had investors call me and say, hey, I got this property, I redid it, and I need appraisal and see what it's worth. And I'm like, now you're calling for an appraisal? You should have figured out what it was worth before you bought it. I mean,
Right.
that's just, this is backwards, So you really need to understand the appraisal process and the value process. So yeah, I do that. And the appraisal business has been a huge benefit for me for flipping, because I'm all over Birmingham, Shelby County, Jefferson County. And so I know little pockets. I flip houses all over. I mean, not just one little neighborhood. So
yeah. All right, so when did you start feeling the heat? Were you blindsided by the recession, or did you kind of start feeling it pretty early on?
I don't want to say blindsided, but had a feeling that things were, but it was really quick in my situation. We were, we had lines of credit with 2 different banks, and then had some personal money too. And, we were just buying, we had the lines extended out, and it was just like, all of a sudden, the bankers, whenever they called us in before, was like, hey, we want to increase your line. We want to go from 200 to 300,000. It was always a good thing. You know? And then we got a call from the bank and said, hey, we need to talk about this line, And so I was so naive. They called us in and he said, listen, the bank's getting nervous about the situation and everything, and we need to call your loan in. And I was like, what do you mean call the loan in? I'd never even heard to call the loan in. He said, well, we need you to pay it back. And I said, well, I know we're going to pay it back, but he said, no, we need you to pay it back like in 60 days. And I'm like,
wow,
oh, $300,000 in 60 days. I'm like, how are we going to do that? And so I was rudely awakened to the situation of when the banks want their money. What happened was it was a snowball effect, because then we had to sell stuff at a discount just to get that capital to pay back that first line. Well, we lost money on several properties selling, and then we didn't really have the equity in properties for the other line of credit. And then it was just like one thing after another, and you just go, it was just, my eyes were opened quickly at that point.
Yeah, so it was an amazing education, right? So, I mean, we hear a lot of people talking now about, there's a crash coming, we're heading towards a cliff. What do you see?
I don't think it's going to be like it was. I do see there's got to be some kind of adjustment. I mean, it's just so nuts. The only thing is inventories are so low that I don't think it's going to happen like it did back in 2007, 2008. Because there was a lot of property out there. Everybody's bidding, but there was still a lot of stuff. Not like now. It's so scarce. So I think there'll be an adjustment. But my issue back then was I had so much more debt than I needed. I thought I was being conservative, but I wasn't, and that calling loans in and then having to come up with money, made me realize, I'm in debt too much. And then what I did, I had all those rental houses. Normally you think, okay, you got rental properties, maybe that'll get you through. But my thought process was I wanted those rental properties for retirement, so I wanted to get them paid off soon. So I only got 15-year notes on them. Well, they really weren't cash flowing. It was minimal cash flow.
Right.
And then so if you have any issues, you're stuck. And then I had a drug addict break into one of my houses and burned it, and that was a $40,000 renovation that the insurance company paid, but they let me know that was the last payment that they were going to make, And so this is back when people were stealing copper out of the units. And so all of a sudden I'm starting to have to pay a couple $1,000s for units, and it was just like everything was draining and there was not anything coming in, So I hung on for a couple years, but I went through my savings, my retirement, and then there wasn't anything left. I still had all that debt.
Wow. Well, a wise person once said that failure is your greatest teacher. Do you feel like you've learned enough from that period to insulate yourself going forward?
Yeah, I think I learned a ton. I sleep a lot better at night. And I did stuff that when you've got a lot of money coming in, you don't think about, your bills. So if you got $20,000 a month coming in, who cares about $10,000 a month in bills? That's nothing, But when all of a sudden $20,000 a month turns to $2,000 a month, then $10,000 is a whole different thing. So now I pretty much don't have car payments, I've got my mortgage. If everything failed, I can sit there and pay my bills. I'm much better off than I was. And and then the other thing is you get into this mindset, because we had pretty large lines of credit and we could just write a check for a house. We'd go to somebody's house and say, we'll close and write you a check. And you start writing $100,000 checks. Your mindset is you start thinking, oh, this $30,000 car is nothing, because I'm writing $100,000 checks, but you your perception gets a little bit off, and so all those things that are $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 really are something,
They add up.
Yeah, they add up a lot, So I look at it now as a blessing. It really is, because now my wife, she works for the school system, does make a lot of money, but we take her whole paycheck and put it in a 401k. We don't even we started a couple of years ago, we don't even touch it, So 10 years of doing that, that'll build up a nice little part of a retirement.
Heck yeah.
So I'm much better off. Yeah.
Well, what I'm truly fascinated about with your story is, you going from this kind of riches to rags. It wiped you out, but yet you're still here. You persevered. You got back, you picked yourself back up and dusted yourself off and kept going. Where did you find the strength to do that?
Well, I will tell you, for a couple years, I was discouraged. I was down. I don't ever wish that on anybody. People going through the phone calls, people coming to your door looking for money. It was really discouraging. And I honestly, for probably a year, my credit, I always had high sevens credit scores, everything was fine. And then all of a sudden it was all gone. And I just got discouraged. I didn't want to talk to lenders. I just let it all go. And then about a year, I was like, this is what I know though. I know real estate. And I saw a couple friends of mine that were starting to buy again. I'm like, I know what to do, and it's like I've learned. And then I had a couple friends approach me that had money, and they're like, we can make money. And, I've got the money if you just take off with it. And so I'm like, yeah, I can do this. I know I can. So that's how I got back in and been gangbusters ever since. So.
Wow. So that's interesting. So, you had some key figures, in your life that understood that you had this gift, right? So your expertise was valuable to them. Exactly. And so, you had something the marketplace wanted. Yeah. And so that's amazing. Mm-hmm. I love that. All right. So just to recap here, you're saying that, finding the money is easy. That's not the problem. The money's there if you can find the deal.
Exactly. If you can show somebody that has money, because people have money for a reason, they're smart with it. And if you can show them a good return on their investment, it is there. Like I say, the hard money, people, if people go to the RIA meetings, the Real Estate Investment Club meetings, there's hard money lenders there and they're sharp. They'll tell you if it's a deal too. If you come to them with a deal and they look at it and like, it's not a deal, it's probably not a deal because, they're seeing it all the time. But if it's a deal, they've got money there to lend. You might pay 12% for money or something, but it's short term, 14% I've seen people. But if you make the numbers work with a 14% interest rate because it's short term, it's still a good deal. You can still make them work.
But real quick for you, do you do any tax sales? Do you get into that kind of stuff?
I don't. I know people that do. I tried. I do too many things probably as it is. And,
right.
I just can't branch off into more things. But I know people that have done real well with tax sale stuff, but I have not learned, the whole process because it takes time. It takes time researching and then following up on all that stuff. So, but that's possible. It's definitely possible because I see people doing it.
Yeah. There's a lot of diversity here in the investments, right? Because you could do, in terms of rentals, I know a lot of people are into the Section 8 and things like that. Yeah. Have you gotten into that at all?
I used to do a lot of Section 8 now, and I just bought a townhouse about 4 weeks ago that I'm going to have, because I'm going to acquire rentals again. I'm a firm believer in rentals, and so this is going to be my first rental getting back into that. I'm going to try to have a small portfolio of rentals. But in Section 8, I've got one investor that I know, I think he has 100 houses, all Section 8. He loves Section 8. And people, Section 8's got kind of a bad rap because my Section 8 people were good because if they messed up and if they tore up your house, they could get thrown off the program. So there's incentive for them to keep your house nice, and it's a guaranteed check every month, so yes. There's benefits to Section 8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into some of the technical side here and just talk about the general formula and kind of figuring out this ARV.
Kind of want to tell you, like wholesale, when I mentioned wholesalers, there's a formula that's kind of basic, and the percentages might vary a little bit. But say if you find a deal, or what you think is a deal, you take 75% of the ARV. So say if you have a $100,000 or $200,000 house, you take 75% of that ARV minus whatever it costs to renovate it. So if it's $50,000, you take that $50,000, and that's basically the offer that you're going to make somebody. So that 25% from the 100 to 75% is kind of your profit margin, your holding cost, and all that. Different markets are different ways. Now, lower end houses, you've got to go maybe 60 or 65% because you're talking about a smaller amount of money. So
Right.
you got to. Now, if you're an upper end, you're doing a $500,000 house, you're not going to get it at 75% of the ARV, typically, unless it was just really trashed. So you might do 80 or 85% of that ARV minus the renovation cost. So then your profit is in that 10 to 15% range in holding costs. That's kind of just a general rule of thumb to look at things. Now, that is just to give you a snapshot of it. If I find something that I think is really good, I'm going to do all the numbers. I'm going to go through and just detail what I need to do as far as renovations so that I know what I think is 50,000 is really 50,000, because it might be 55 or 60 or whatever it might be. So that's all detailed. And then I might come back with a hard number. But I can look at it real quick and say, okay, if I can get it at roughly in this area, it could be a deal. Then we can negotiate. So that's kind of in a nutshell, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and just to make sure people are paying attention, you teach this stuff.
Yeah.
So this is just a very, very quick intro,
Yeah.
but you do a deep dive with your students.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we go in through, and I will break down actual deals that I've done. We have case studies that we go through all the numbers and I'll show them what I thought it was going to be and what it ended up being, because I'm usually pretty close, but things go over, things go wrong, things are, things that you didn't know are happening, and so it gets your budget over. So that's just the reality. So you always figure, I tell my students is, figure in a fudge factor, figure in a factor there, because you better give yourself 5 or 10% because something's going to happen, So, yeah.
In some cases, are you not able to inspect these properties, get inside of them before you buy them?
I have done that once or twice, but I've got to get a really good deal. The numbers have got to be really good for me not to look at it. That's just me. I'm nervous about buying stuff. Now, there's people that do that, but you'd have to make the numbers really good for me not to be able to get in the house. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, so let's talk about flipping, Bruce. How did you make the transition from kind of field work to the classroom? That's interesting.
Just over the years, I've had so many people approach me, and I've really helped a number of people, kind of mentored them. I've got several guys that have portfolios or rentals, now that I've worked with. And so then probably about 4 or 5 years ago, some of the RIA groups, the investment clubs, asked me to speak, and so I've spoken at a couple of the clubs, or 2 or 3 of them here. And then a couple asked me, hey, would you put on a class? See if we could do a class. So I've done a couple classes for the groups. And then I just said, I enjoyed it. When people are in there and they're really interested, it's fun for me. So I sit there and have a good time. And I thought, I'm going to put on a class of my own. And so I ended up doing that for about a dozen students and just had fun doing it. And I thought, I'd like to maybe, try this nationally, do it online, make it bigger. So that's kind of where Flippin' Bruce came from. And it's been a slow process. I'm the proverbial tortoise in the hare. I'm the tortoise, it's like, I just plug away, and so that's where I'm at. And, it's a membership site. And then I'm going to try to, develop a coaching program for maybe 10 people at a time, something like that. I'm putting that together, but right now it's a membership, really just about learning. We do weekly calls, and they can look at all my portfolio of my numbers and see stuff that I've done, and so that's kind of
kind of Q&A type stuff.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Every week we do Q&A, and I tell them too, because I'll do live Facebook for my group at my flips. I believe there's nothing better than being, an active flipper and showing them, hey, what I run into. If I run into a problem, I get on Facebook and show, hey, guys, this is what we ran into today, and this is how we got to handle it. And so I think that's a great way of showing them.
So it's not necessarily like a 90-day course. It's just an ongoing thing. You're a member and you're just constantly getting information.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just a membership, a monthly membership fee, and it's $29 a month or $199 for a year, and you get it for the whole year. So, I mean, it's not much, but then we'll have some individual coaching evolve into that too. So I'm working on that. But right now, it's just basically really a school, kind of a learning process for people.
And how long have you been doing the education side?
For a couple years, but the Flippin' Bruce just started. I think we're in our 22nd week or something. I've done like 22, 23 calls, so about 22, 23 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. That would be cool. I'd love to go out in the field with you sometime and just maybe see how you work and how you identify a deal or something.
Yeah.
It's fascinating what you do, and I know a lot of people want to do it. Have you been able to have any success stories with students yet?
Yeah, definitely. Not so much with these students right now, although they're working on deals. I've got 2 or 3 of them that are in the process of deals right now, so I'm kind of helping them with it. But I've got one guy that he probably has 8 or 10 rentals. He did some flips over the last 15, 18 years. It's been a while. But so I helped him with flips, and then he wanted to start acquiring rentals, and so he ended up doing that, and we worked together on that. So he's done real well with that.
Yeah, I would imagine some of your students might come to you and go, "Hey, Bruce, I got a good deal."
Actually, yes, that happens, and I'm very open to that, and we can do a deal together. I'm very open to doing that. Yeah,
because I would imagine you would have more success stories, but there's probably a lot of people in this group that are just still scared to death.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. It's hard. I mean, you're dealing with big numbers, and it's if you're not sure exactly what it is, it's difficult. So yeah, I encourage people, because I've had a couple people come to me with deals, and they are deals. We're in the process of trying to do some negotiating right now to get a couple houses. It's definitely possible.
I wanted to circle back and talk about the team that you need to put together so people can kind of start keeping an eye out for these people. I mean, you already mentioned, the real estate agent. When you talk about banking, are you talking about a local bank you have a relationship with?
Yes and no. I mean, it's hard with the bigger banks to a lot of them, it's a little too risky for them to do investment properties, but your smaller banks are definitely open to it. And especially if you bank with a smaller bank, and you already have that relationship. I deal with a bank here that I started dealing with 5, 6 years ago, and just went into them and said, "Hey, this is what I'm doing," and they approved me for if I ever want to do a deal. Where normally a big bank would probably never even talk to you, about that, but they were very open to it, and so they're really pretty good terms. So small banks are open, credit unions. If you're dealing with a relationship with credit, some credit unions will do it. So those kind of things are definitely out there, but that's part of the team. There's really 3 members of the team. There's a lot, but 3 main ones. That's the realtor, some kind of funding, a lender, and then contractors. Those are the 3. But the lending, that's probably actually your first thing. Go ahead and get that nailed, because you really can't do until you know how much money you have access to. You really, it doesn't do too much good to look for stuff, and then if you can't buy it, so you want to get the lending down pat. I definitely recommend, if you deal with a small bank, and if you don't even deal with a small bank, just look at some of the small banks around town. Some of them are open to it for sure.
Yeah. You said go to these real estate investment groups, find one in your area. Yes. I mean, they're typically all over.
Yeah, they are. And I encourage people, definitely go to it, because you're with like minds. You're with people that are doing hundreds, thousands of deals. I mean, that's where you need to be. And then you're going to find tips on realtors. You're going to find tips on lending. You're going to find good contractors, or contractors to stay away from. I mean, so yeah, the RIA meetings are really a must if you're going to get into this.
Well, I definitely want to dive into the contractor realm. I mean, did the contractors go to these meetings as well?
Some do.
Some do.
And those are the ones that you want. I mean, typically, because some contractors don't want anything to do with investors. And part of the reason is there's not a lot of profit margin for it's a tight, you've got to keep your costs down in your renovations. Right. And so some of your contractors that are typically doing retail stuff and the upper end areas, they're not going to be interested in that. So you've got to find the right contractor that likes working, because some contractors like it. I got my contractors. It's working with an investor is a lot easier than working with a retail customer. Once you know what the investor wants, the contractor can just kind of run with it, and there's not as much headache. So it may not be as much money, but there's a fair amount of work, and it's a lot less hassle a lot of times. So they're out there. They're definitely out there.
Well, I have a hard time in the real estate business finding, the contractors always seem to start out great, and the communication's great, and then then they just kind of disappear. I don't know. I feel like people that are in any type of contracting or general contractors, handymen, you name it, fence people. I mean, it doesn't matter. Painters. We've had several. Like, my wife wants to build a pergola and do this kind of outdoor kitchen thing, and she's had people come out, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I had the greatest contractor come out today. He's in the witness protection program now. He's just gone." And I'm thinking to myself, these guys aren't salespeople, and they need like assistance or something. They'd probably be a lot better off. But so, how do you find? And then once you find a good contractor, keep them engaged.
It's difficult. I mean, because I go through contractors, and in 15, 20 years, I can't tell you how many, heat and air guys I've gone through just like that. I mean, they'll be great. I mean, I keep them for several years and then gone. They'll have some kind of personal problem, something, and they've moved on. You'll have a roofer that, you just love this roofer, and then there'll be tornadoes in Georgia, and he's gone.
Right.
I mean, just no notice or anything. He's chasing the money, and it's like, come on, I got half a roof here,
Right.
I mean, it's like, so I run into it too. So, but a couple things, the communication, talking to them all the time, paying them. I got guys that want to hold pay. These kind of contractors, you got to pay every Friday. I mean, and sometimes in the middle of the week because they need money, so I never hesitate. When they need money, I give them money, because usually as long as they're good, and they're doing good work for me, I'm going to be there for, I'm never not going to pay them or try to get them to wait 30 days or something. You just can't do stuff like that, with this kind of worker, so they're living week to week. You got to weed through a lot of them. And then even then when you get some, they might last for a few years and something happens and you got to find another, And I always try to recommend having a couple, like, don't just
backup.
Yeah, don't just have one plumber, don't have one painter because something will happen, and then you're stuck. So, it's a challenge. Honestly, probably contractor is one of the bigger challenges of this.
I would think so. It's just, it is amazing. I mean, we bought a house in Highland Park, and it needs a lot of work. And we had a contractor come out and start, gave him a list. He did the first list, and we were like, all right, come back and we'll get the second list. Never came back. So we're like, okay, he's obviously got a better deal or something going on. Yeah. But it's just constant, and it's gotten to the point where I just have the hardest time recommending somebody. Yeah. Because even if they're good, you never know when they're going to have that flake out moment, right? So it's so tough. Yeah. Well, you seem like you really enjoy what you do, and that you're having fun. And I would imagine that finding, the deal and, taking something that, is maybe kind of run down and turning it into something beautiful. What are things about what you do that you really love?
That I do love it. And one of the big things is taking something, it might not be instant gratification, but it's pretty close. I mean, you can take just the most horrible property, and in, 3 months, it's the neighbors just think it's the most beautiful thing. I mean, I've had more neighbors hug me. I mean, because they've lived next to a property for maybe 10 years. It's been run down. There's nothing they can do. And they know that they're going to have a hard time selling their property if they ever have to, because this property is so bad beside them. And I'll come in and just start working on it. And one of the things I do is I go meet the neighbors. When I go to, and find a house, after I get started, I go knock on the doors. I meet the neighbors. I say, hey, this is what we're doing. If you have any questions, if there's if my guys are not doing something, please call me. I give them my card. And I make a relationship with those neighbors. And then I've even had open houses just for the neighbors. I mean, a pre-open house, just so because the neighbors, they want to see what's going on. They've watched the people going in and out, and they want to see. So I had one in Vestavia last year. I had 19 neighbors come in. We had an open house on the weekend. We had one on Thursday or Friday, and had 19 neighbors come because they were all excited about seeing it. And you never know what neighbor's going to have a friend that wants to buy that property.
Well, that's what I was going to say. What has been the collateral effect of that?
Exactly. I have sold more than one house because a neighbor, making that relationship with a neighbor. So I do all that. It's a true win-win-win. Because I'm taking a house, the neighborhood is I'm making it better. I'm giving somebody a really nice house to live in, and I'm hopefully making some money. I love it. I mean, I do. Now, it's not without headache. It's not without some stress. If you can deal with those little things, it's great. I mean, I enjoy it. Yeah.
Well, thinking about stresses and maybe surprises, I mean, do you have anything you can think of that was kind of shocking to you in this industry?
I'm never surprised anymore. It's like there's stuff. But, I wrote a book, and the first chapter in the book is flipping houses right for me? Because over the years, I have worked with several different people that it's not. You've got to really evaluate your risk tolerance, and if you're the kind of person that things bother you and you're going to lose sleep, or you've got knots in your stomach because something doesn't go right, maybe this isn't for you. You've really got to look at how you handle, adversity. And if you can handle it and roll off and just adjust and make adjustments, then it's probably good. But some people, I had an older couple that they put their retirement money in, and a lot of stuff was going wrong. Now, we got out of it, and everything was fine at the end, but there was a lot of stuff that came up. Mm-hmm. I felt horrible because they were losing sleep. It was really bothering them because this is all they could think about was, I'm going to lose my money. This is my retirement, and I'm like, I don't want anybody to go through stuff like that, it wasn't for them. They need to just put it in retirement fund somewhere and go on.
There's quite a bit of the population that probably just needs to play it safe, right?
There is. There's definitely more than a lot of people dream and think it'd be great, but it probably wouldn't be a fit for them.
And then you got to be a good money manager, right? You can't get a big payday and then go blow it. You got to be disciplined with your finances, and some people just aren't prepared to know what to do with that kind of freedom. Yeah. So that could be a problem. Yeah. Well, what's the name of the book?
Oh, it's First Flip.
First Flip. Yeah. You can get that on Amazon? Or where
Amazon, it's on Amazon, but I also actually, on my website, flippinbruce.com, it's for sale on my website for half price. And what I've got is a deal going on. If you buy the book, you get a month free in the membership too, so you can kind of experience what we do in the membership.
That's great.
Yeah, so at flippinbruce.com.
Yeah. I don't know. Are you able to? Do people come to you and say, "Hey, Bruce, do you think I got what it takes to do this?"
Honestly, I'm not abrupt, but I'm pretty honest because I don't want, if I know somebody really has issues, I'll suggest it might not be. And I even do a thing I did with somebody. I said, listen, and this was a rental because this actually happened. How would you react? You take this rundown property, and you're in there working. It's your blood, sweat, and tears. You're in there doing it. You make it really nice, and you give it to somebody, and you're so excited. And, hey, they're happy. They're paying you. They pay you a month or two, and then all of a sudden, they don't pay you. And so you're starting to call, and no answer. You can't get a hold of them. And then 3 months goes by, and years going by, and you can't find them at the house. And then finally, you got a victim. And then 6 months later, you've gotten 2 months rent, and you get your house back, and it's trash, How would you handle that? How would you react? And people are like, I'm ready to kill somebody. I'm like, well, you know what? That's going to happen at some point, So I put it out there, worst case scenario. Now, that doesn't happen all the time, but those are scenarios that can happen, So anyhow.
Have you found any tricks to get those people to respond? Like they start, ghosting you and not paying?
It's difficult now, and some people are not for this. I think the term is,
cash for keys.
Cash for keys. Yeah, exactly.
That's
and
right.
Hey, you know what? Swallow your pride. And, it's hard because here you're somebody that's not paying you, and you want to get them out of your property, and you're going to give them more money, but the alternative is them staying in there for another 3 to 6 months, you going through the eviction process and all that cost and everything. Every case, every thing scenario is different, but I've done it before. I said, listen, you need some help to get moved out. I'll give you a couple $100, if to get a truck or whatever, and help them out. Because most people mean well.
Yeah.
There are people out there that are just, to get the system, but most mean well, and something has happened, and you'd rather just, hey, let's get this over with and get my house back, so.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so let's say I got a standard 40-hour-a-week job, and I want to go to the website. I want to go to flippinbruce.com. I want to get the book. I want to start getting into the trainings. How many hours, should I expect if I find a deal Like, how many extra hours? Is there a way to gauge how many extra hours per week you have to put into it, realistically?
It's going to vary, but you've got to put some time in, because you're most likely you're going to be out driving, some neighborhoods, looking at the houses and meeting with some contractors. So, I work maybe 50, 60 hours a week doing appraisals. I mean, so I work a lot, and I'm able to fit in doing, 6, 8, 10 sometimes houses a year flipping. But now I'm pretty efficient with my time. So when you're new, it's going to take you more time driving neighborhoods. But I tell people there's several things, don't, somebody said, Crestwood's a great area, but I live in Alabaster. I said, well, don't flip in Crestwood if you live in Alabaster, because you don't want to drive an hour just to go look at properties.
Right.
There's plenty of properties around Alabama. I can pick anywhere in Birmingham, and within 5 minutes, I can find you a neighborhood that you can flip a house in. I mean, it is honestly, you can do that. So keep the drive short. Do it in an area that you're familiar with, and that'll help you, save you a bunch of time there. And then we go over a lot of different things, how to, make quick assessments of, but then you're always going to have to go back and meet the contractor and actually do a thorough assessment if you're going to pull the trigger on something. But then that's where a good team, though, the team helps you. Your realtor does a lot of research. Your contractor can cut down the time on doing the estimates. Your lender already has that set aside. So, having a good team can cut a lot of the hours out for you.
All right, so good team. You need to start small.
Yes, definitely.
You see people like going to these luxury homes or big old square footage homes.
Yes. I see people do it, but I would not recommend it. I personally like kind of the first time home buyer market. Here in Birmingham, $150,000, $200,000, maybe $250,000, but keep it smaller. I bought one house last year in Hueytown for, I think, $25,000. And put like $30,000 in and sold it for like $89,000.
Wow.
Hey, I mean, that was a good little flip.
Yeah.
So they're out there and you can do it, but definitely stay smaller. There's just no sense in risking a whole lot when you're just starting out.
And mentorship is key. Yeah. Going to the REI meetings, making contacts. Yes. Learning from them. I mean, I'm sure, nobody succeeds alone. And, somebody took those guys, the seasoned guys in your meetings, probably to coffee or lunch and pick their brain.
Exactly.
So they're willing to pay it forward.
Yes. I've had more people take me to lunch, and people that I've, now I look and they're big time flippers, they're big time realtors, and I met them when they were, just starting, and had lunch with them. And so it's exciting for me to see how far a lot of these people have come.
Yeah. Right. Is there any other way people can get in touch with you? You just want to direct all the traffic to flippingbruce.com?
Yeah, or my email. It's bruce@flippingbruce.com. So I answer emails all the time. So if you got a specific or particular question, just shoot me an email, bruce@flippingbruce.com. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well, anything else we need to know about before we close? Any parting words of wisdom?
Well, I tell people, because a lot of people want to do it. It's so funny. You meet people, and I would say probably 80% of the population has thought about flipping a house. I mean, it's just like, so it is possible. I mean, it really is possible. If you have some systems in place and, a little bit of knowledge, I mean, it really is. So it's very little money to come join our site. And, hey, 2 or 3 months you go, well, maybe it's not what I want. Or you go, hey, I want to do this farther and really learn more. I'd love to have them.
Well, this has been really informative. Bruce, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
You are a wealth of knowledge. Anyway, everybody, please support Bruce, flippingbruce.com, and stop thinking about it and start doing it. We know you want to invest. Hey, thanks for listening. If you got some value out of this podcast, please share it and give us a nice rating on iTunes. I appreciate the audience very much, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Impact Agent Podcast. If you liked the show and got something out of it, please like the Impact Agent Podcast on Facebook and rate and review the show on iTunes or anywhere you listen to podcasts. This really helps us grow the show and helps other agents find it. Please share it with your friends and coworkers as well. Want us to deliver the show to you via email every week? Then email me at jason@impactagentuniversity.com and we'll send you the show every week. Please let us know what you think about the show, what you like, what you don't, or possibly make a suggestion about a topic you want to hear. Email me at jason@impactagentuniversity.com or leave us a message on Facebook at Impact Agent Podcast. Until next week, everybody be productive, safe, and happy, and always keep learning. This podcast is produced by Johnny Gwynn at Deep Fried Studios in Mobile, Alabama, and is paid for and powered by ImpactAgentUniversity.com.